Hi everyone, as a part of this 100 plus Spring Boot annotation series, today is the next video on this series where we are going to cover what is the use of configuration annotation and how internally it works. But before starting this video, if you are new to our channel, do subscribe our channel and share this video with your friends. Let's get started. So configuration annotation indicates that the class can be used by the Spring IOC container as a source of bean definition. So when you create any class which is annotated with @configuration annotation, that class can be used as a source of bean definition. In short, if you want to explicitly configure the beans, then you can use a class with @configuration annotation. Now let's see an example to understand how configuration annotation works. Understand the configuration annotation, I have created a simple class, custom configuration, which is annotated with @configuration annotation. Inside this, I am creating two bean of my classes. You can see my class and my class 2. The one thing if you have noticed here that both the classes are not annotated with any component scanning annotation. With either it's a component, service, repository. So Spring will not create beans for this. But I want to explicitly configure this bean in Spring IOC. So for that, what you can do, you can create two methods, each of the individual classes, and annotate with @bean. And inside that class, you have to return your class object. So what will happen that when the bean will be created, it will register into the Spring IOC container. Now let's start the server and see how this works. So for the example purpose, I have created a statement inside this constructor. So whenever the bean will be initialized, whenever the class object will be created, our statement will be printed. As we can see in the logs, the class my class bean is instantiated, that the statement is printed, and same for the other class. That means both the classes bean is registered while the Spring server starts. Now what happens internally is the Spring first check all the classes which are annotated with @configuration when the Spring server starts. And then later it check all the methods which are annotated with @bean. Then it will create those bean in the Spring IOC. Now understand how this internally works. For that, I have prepared a document where I have mentioned how step by step this process works internally. So this is the document I have prepared for this, where I have given a basic definition how configuration works, what are the key roles of the configuration. Then the main concept is internal working of configuration, how internally configuration works. So this is the advanced concept. So if you are preparing for a senior Java developer role, then make sure that you understand how configuration annotation works. So for that, the first step inside the internal working is class scanning. So we already know that whenever the Spring start, the Spring server will check all the classes. For that, it has to initialize a bean. Now it will also check all the classes which are annotated with @configuration, which is done via the class path bean definition scanner. When it scans all the classes, it will check that all the methods which are annotated with @bean. Then it will create a bean for those methods in IOC container. Then it will create a CGLIB proxy, which will make sure that the singleton behavior intact. For all the @configuration classes, Spring create a CGLIB proxy, which you can understand that it's a layer between your classes call and the IOC container. So whenever the @bean method calls comes to this proxy, first it will check whether the bean is already there in the IOC container or not. If it is there, it will return the existing instance, so that it will make sure the singleton classes behavior remains intact. Because in Spring Boot, all the classes by default are singleton behavior. So to make sure that behavior remains intact, Spring create a CGLIB proxy for each configuration class. So this is how internally the configuration annotation works, which makes sure that all the beans should remain singleton. Now one thing, if you understand that here we are creating my class, and here this my class method we are again calling. So because of the singleton, this bean is instantiated only once. When we call this method again, it will first check whether the bean is already there. If it is there, then it will not initialize that bean, it will just reuse that bean. Now what happen if we will change this configuration annotation with at the rate simple component annotation? Now this class bean will also be registered when the spring will initialized. So it will check as the component scanning, it will be find out, and the spring will create a bean of this. As a part of that, this bean will also be created. Now one thing here is, because configuration annotation internally create a proxy, but the component will not create a proxy. That means it will not check whether the bean is already there or not. So in our scenario, if we will run this class again, if we will run the server again, our bean will be initialized 2 times. Reason is, so you can see in the logs, the first my class bean is instantiated, second the my class bean is instantiated printed again. That means our constructor is called 2 times, our bean is created 2 times. And why it created? Because we are calling the my class bean method again. And here the proxy is not there, so the check is not there. Because of that, it will create a new bean. So that is the issue with the component. So make sure that whenever you are creating explicitly bean, make sure those are under the configuration annotation. So that Spring will make sure that this singleton behavior remains intact. Now in the part of document, I also mentioned some scenario based interview questions which can be asked in the interview. Most of the things we have already discussed is a part of this video, which you can find out in these questions. Here I have mentioned what is the scenario and what is the answer. Also we have understand what is the use of when we replace the configuration with the component annotation. So these all things we have covered as a part of this video. If you have any doubt in this video, you can comment. I will try to resolve ASAP. If you find this video useful, do share with your friends, and if you are new to our channel, do subscribe our channel.